Commonwealth leaders are meeting in Rwanda to reaffirm their common values and agree actions and policies to improve the lives of all their citizens. The 2022 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, Shogom 2022 in Kigali, opened with a youth forum taking place concurrently with other forums. President Muhammadu Buhari departed Abuja on Wednesday to attend the meeting. And as part of his contribution to deliberations at the summit, the president is scheduled to deliver a speech at a high-level session on malaria and neglected tropical diseases summit, and also participate in an intergenerational dialogue for youth. Joining us on the show this morning as we discuss how the heads of government are expected to reaffirm their commitment to upholding the Commonwealth Charter is Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, Nigeria's former Minister of Foreign Affairs. He will also be commenting on the plan by the UK government to relocate refugees to Rwanda. Welcome to the morning show, Professor Akinyemi. Good to have you on the show. Morning, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Ruben Abati, and good morning, Ms. Tundu Abiola. Good morning, sir.
Well, Prof, let's start with the significance, the symbolism of this Commonwealth meeting coming 2 years late because of COVID-19. But the same issues, 54 countries, over 5,000 participants. But there have been issues about one, the choice of Rwanda. Is this an endorsement, a show for the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, who has been considered the sweet dictator in the eyes of the West? Then the second issue, of course, about whether the Commonwealth itself is not in urgent need of reform.
Thank you very much for your pertinent questions. And I will roll the two together into one single one. What is Rwanda doing in the Commonwealth? Why was it admitted into the Commonwealth in the first place? And I will give you a one-word answer. Holocaust or genocide. I think the world, and that includes members of the Commonwealth, had a sense of guilt about the genocide in Rwanda between the Tutsis and the Hutus. The same kind of guilt that the world has when you discuss Israel, and that allows Israel to get away with things which the other members of the global community will not get away with. The same thing happens with Rwanda. And President Kagame is a master player of the game. He's exploited this for his own program in Rwanda. Now, my choice of words were very careful. Genocide, I said, between Hutus and Tutsis, because the Tutsis are the minority, and yet they have been ruling the Hutus. And so you have to ask yourself, how democratic is that? And in order to now justify this not only one-man rule, but one minority rule, that card of genocide has been played very skillfully by President Kagame, in spite of the fact that there are a whole lot of unresolved issues about who killed, who shot down the plane carrying the two Hutu presidents, who actually initiated the killings in Rwanda itself. So, when Rwanda then applied to join the Commonwealth, the rules were changed in order to admit Rwanda. There were human rights communities who objected, who pointed out to the Commonwealth that under no circumstances did Rwanda qualify to be a member, but Rwanda became a member of the Commonwealth. And having the summit in Rwanda at this time has been, it's a disaster for the Commonwealth, actually, if we have to talk true, because an organization that is supposed to be founded on common values of democracy, resolve for human rights, and what have you, you are having your summit in a country where a man has been president there for how many years now? And he's been scoring the Soviet 98-point-something% in each election that he had contested. Usually, very conveniently, his opponents have usually been in jail while that election has taken place. How that qualifies for democracy and human rights really beats me. And you talked just before it was my turn to appear on your program about Windrush. Britain itself is probably as guilty in terms of racial policies as the racial policies which Kagame carries out in Rwanda. You say, you ask the Rwandese, are you Hutu or are you Tutsis? And the man replies, don't ask me that kind of question. Of course, I'm Rwandese. But the simple answer is, if he says he's Hutu, he's going to jail straight away. And it's a police state. And frankly, I find nothing good to say about Rwanda. Nothing.
Right, thank you, sir. To add to that awkward juxtaposition of principles that are espoused and actual practice was the recent row over the first flight carrying asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda, which was stopped by the European Court of Justice. That government policy of the government of Boris Johnson has been criticized by everybody, from the Archbishop of Canterbury to the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, who Boris Johnson will be meeting in Rwanda. But Boris Johnson sort of called the Brexiteers to battle stations, essentially going on this strong anti-immigration undercurrent that exists, which you just referred to with the undercurrent of racism in the UK, but Rwanda also being a willing accomplice. I'd like your comments on that.
Well, thank you very much. Number one, let us deal with the fundamentals of that agreement between Rwanda and Great Britain. Some people have focused on the money Rwanda will make out of it. To me, that is looking at the tail end of the whole issue. The important thing is that Kagame wants to use acceptance of those refugees to change the national equation, the national balance in Rwanda. I started off my own analysis by saying Rwanda is made up of minority Tutsis and majority Hutus. So there is a ratio percentage in that population. When you now bring in refugees, you diminish the percentage of Hutus vis-a-vis its relationship to the Tutsis. And that's what he has done by signing that agreement. A time bomb has been planted in Rwanda. You know, it's rather, I can't remember what English word to use now. Patel, the British minister who is in charge of this, is a Ugandan Asian who was expelled, or her parents were expelled from Uganda by Idi Amin because of the racial tension between the Asians and the Ugandans. Now, Kagame is doing the same thing. You are bringing in Syrians, Afghanistans, Iraqis, and what have you. You are bringing them in there into an already explosive situation between the Tutsis and the Hutus. Somewhere along the line, 10, 20, 25 years, this is going to explode. And unfortunately, the first casualties, and history bears this out, are going to be these non-Rwandese who have been brought in. Because wherever Asians are brought into African society, they usually become, even though they are minorities, they usually become dominant economically. And they bear the brunt of the resentment that is going to happen. This is the dangerous racial situation that Kagame is creating in Rwanda. Why is this our business? I will tell you very simply. Anything that happens in an African country happens to all of us. In fact, listen to my language. I said, in an African country. So every African is going to bear the opprobrium of the conflagration that is going to arise because of this policy. We are all going to be tagged racist when the Hutus again flare up. And they will flare up. They are a majority in their own country. And they are not going to allow themselves to be enslaved forever. So to that extent, Africa ought to speak out. But the reason Africans cannot speak out is, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Who is going to talk? Is it South Africa that is going to talk? And believe me, Kagame has a very sharp tongue in his mouth. He will go after you, all guns blazing. If South Africa tries to talk, it will remind Cyril Ramaphosa about some $1 million, that is hidden somewhere. If Nigerians try to talk, well, you know what his answer is going to be. Go and resolve the matter in your own country first. So nobody is going to talk. Britain cannot talk because of the Windrush, as well as Britain is complicit in this, whatever it is. Australia cannot talk because Australia was, in fact, the first Commonwealth country that planted, in order to stop refugees from coming in, signed this agreement with, I think, Western Samoa, or one of these South Pacific islands, for the refugees to go there first. So really, the Commonwealth are unfortunately a good dream, and at one time, because don't forget, it had values, and we were suspended because we didn't keep to those values. Fiji was suspended, Zimbabwe was suspended. So why double standard with Rwanda? If not that Rwanda and Great Britain are partners in this odious game, that racial game that they are playing.
Well, Prof, beyond all the issues about post-pandemic recovery, business opportunities, youth forum, women forum, one major item at this Commonwealth meeting in Rwanda will be the election of a new Secretary General. Baroness Patricia Scotland has already spent 6 years. Well, she got 2 additional years because she was asked to continue because of the COVID problem. But this time around, she's still interested in staying on. Apart from Don McKinnon, many of these Commonwealth Secretary Generals have tended to do 2 terms. But UK is sponsoring the foreign minister of Jamaica, Kimani Johnson Smith. But we're also told that it's supposed to be Africa's turn. Kenya showed interest and withdrew. Another African country showed interest and withdrew. What's your assessment of Patricia Scotland's tenure so far? Do you think she deserves re-election, or a place should be taken by someone else who can make more progress with the reform of the Commonwealth Secretariat?
Yes, her tenure has been controversial. Some have accused some of the senior members of the Commonwealth of being racist in their opposition to the way she had spent money, to put things rather mildly. I think that a new broom should be brought in. And if we support the Jamaican foreign minister, we are supporting one of us. You made reference again to reparation, the just cause, which again MK Abiola, pushed to the limit that you could push it to. The essence of an Afro diasporan community should be really a very good and an active principle in the foreign policies of African states. So if we are supporting, or if a candidate from Jamaica is coming up, it's as good as a candidate from Africa coming up. And in the spirit of, that community of Africa and Africans in the diaspora, I think we should support. We should support the Jamaican foreign minister. I don't know why the Kenya foreign minister stepped down, but at least in this case, he's not stepping down for one of the older members of the Commonwealth. It is still within my own essence of Africanness of the plank in the Commonwealth.
What do you think, sir, is the future of the Commonwealth? We just all celebrated the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II, so she's had quite a long reign, which will inevitably end. And she has asked that her son and successor, Prince Charles, becomes head of the Commonwealth. But that's just a request. It's not necessarily a given. And as I said earlier, he has expressed disapproval of government policy with regards to asylum seekers being shipped to or flown to Rwanda, which his mother never did. She tended to stay above the fray. So will it weaken the Commonwealth? Will he head the Commonwealth? Is there any practical use for the Commonwealth? Is there any point of Nigeria maintaining our membership of the Commonwealth going forward?
Tundu, you've asked so many questions. You always do this to me.
I'm sorry,
Which one
sir?
now do you want me to answer?
Just all of them. It's one question, just lots of bullet points.
Okay. Number one, we may be in for a surprise. Prince Charles may actually be more popular with the non-colonial members of the Commonwealth because of his identifying with the youth, climate change, his anti-racist stand, long before the Buckingham Palace thought it would be a nice idea, thanks to Meghan, to employ non-white people in Buckingham Palace. He already had non-white people working for him in his own palace. So he may be more popular with us than actually with Britain itself. And he may breathe new life into the Commonwealth, although in a political way that may not sit down too well with, who knows, Australia, Canada, and Britain itself. That's number one. Number two, you see, the Commonwealth as an institution tends to serve a purpose in multinational organizations. When there is an issue affecting a Commonwealth member, maybe there's a resolution before the UN which is being sponsored by a Commonwealth member. If other Commonwealth members' interests are not affected, they could rally around that resolution, or they could rally around that election, and that's a block of votes there for you. But of course, if there is no consensus within the Commonwealth on that issue, then it's of no use. But more often than not, you get a block of votes. So to that extent, nobody walks away from an international organization because you don't know when you will need it. Thirdly, the Commonwealth has been a very clever organization. And I dare say this is thanks to the British, whom one tends to knock from time to time, and they do deserve to be knocked. My own experience in attending Commonwealth conferences is that, Antonio, you will recognize this. There is no issue that the British civil servants will not find a form of words that will get you over the hump, over the conflict. They will always find it. It will then be phrased in such a way that all of you will walk away, nobody feeling defeated. To that extent, if you just look at what is happening in Kigali, which you have covered in, very, very, very faithfully, and your correspondent there is doing a good job. There's something for the youth. There's going to be something for the women today. There's going to be something for, look, they've identified current issues which are relevant in our lives, and they are devoting. When I was a foreign minister, Commonwealth conferences lasted 3 days. This one is lasting a week, unheard of. This is a modern trend for the Commonwealth. So they are clever in turning the Commonwealth to embrace issues which we can talk about outside the political ones. And it's within the genius of the Commonwealth to try to suppress, if they can do away with people like Boris Johnson in the organization, then I think the Commonwealth will survive. But if there's a right-wing tilt within the Commonwealth, amongst the older ones, like Britain, like Australia, like Canada, I think those are the three big guns there. If there's a right-wing tilt, then I'm afraid that actually the Commonwealth may be in jeopardy.
Well, Prof, one other major highlight at this year's meeting will be the induction of Togo and Gabon, two countries that were never at any point former colonies of Great Britain. They will be joining Mozambique, that joined in 1999 and 1995, and Rwanda, that joined in 2005. Now, what's the attraction for Togo and Gabon? Is it trade? Is it just being in a prominent club where you have about 53, 54 countries in charge of substantial trade in the world?
You may be right, Dr. Abati. I tend to read a political meaning into the attraction of the Commonwealth to the non-English speaking countries. When Rwanda applied for membership, it was a punch in the face of Belgium. Kagame wanted to show that he had alternatives to Belgium and to France, because it was both English-speaking and French-speaking. Togo and Gabon, again, present to me a conflict in terms of human rights and in terms of democracy. You know how long this president has been there in Gabon, who is also the son of a previous president. Now, that is not Commonwealth tradition. The same thing in Togo. But I suspect that they are moving, they've applied to join the Commonwealth. Again, conditions have been waived, or in interpretation of the conditions for membership, there has been a fluidity. And that's part of what I mean by saying the British are very good at choice of words that cover every situation. It's more to escape the stranglehold of France on them, because the French, through what they call the colonial pact, had a stranglehold on its former French-speaking territories. In one sentence, the colonial pact simply says that any export earnings of any French-speaking country must be domiciled in the French Central Bank. They release 25% of it to you for your own development. If you need more money, you could borrow your own reserve at the exorbitant World Bank rate. But France can use it interest-free because it is in their bank. If you want to, if you have a contract to give to build a bridge, it must first be offered to a French company. It's only when there are no French companies interested that you are then allowed to ask for bidding from non-French companies. Those are the kinds of things that are in that colonial pact. What is of interest to me is whether by joining the Commonwealth, they can escape that colonial pact which they were forced to sign on the eve of independence. But it's going to be interesting to watch what kind of objection France will kick about this. But then don't forget, the French, very clever of them also, have invited a country like Nigeria, the African jewel, along with South Africa in the Commonwealth, to be attending the annual French, the annual French-speaking conferences, summits, and we've been doing that. So it's like a chess game between France and Britain on African sentimentalities.
Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, for joining us on The Morning Show. Thank you very much.